Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another session of the Broadband Bunch Learning Series. I'm Guy Bevente. I will be moderating today's call. Today's call is on myth-busting, artificial intelligence, and analytics. Looking forward to the discussion. A quick reminder to our audience and those who may not have joined before, we do make these interactive. So there should be a chat window where you can post your questions. We do have someone monitoring the chats, and I hope to reserve a few minutes at the end where we will take some of the audience questions. And today's session will be recorded, and we will make it available to all attendees and all members of the Broadband Bunch website. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Recently, the Gartner Group published a study that stated that communication service providers plan to increase their investments in artificial intelligence from 30% in 2020 to 70% in 2025. I found that very interesting. I think you would agree that's a significant increase. As we all know, AI and even analytics, it's not really a new subject, right? It's something that we have been exposed to for several years now. And I think it's fair to say that innovative and fast-moving communication service providers have already embraced AI in different areas in our industry, ranging from network optimization, preventative maintenance, think self-healing networks as an example, the use of virtual assistants, RPA, and more. In fact, we're going to talk about a couple of those examples on today's call. Deloitte published a paper saying that 40% of telecoms, including media companies and technology companies, based on their surveys of executives recently, there's claims that they've gained substantial benefits from cognitive technologies such as AI. Although, we hear these positive trends and encouraging trends, let's face it, there is still some skepticism. In fact, another study, this one by Ernst & Young, showed that telco executives were not satisfied with their transformation and adoption of these new technologies like AI. In fact, 46% stated that part of the concerns and not being able to reach the expectations had to do with the absence of a solid long-range plan. And another 67% actually pointed to the lack of skill sets as a reason for why they have not been able to meet the objectives set out. So today, we want to discuss a little bit about the myths and the realities when it comes to adopting AI and analytics with a focus on our industry, telecom. So I have a great panel to help me with this discussion today. So I'd like to introduce them first before we get into it. So first is Christina Jensen, and Christina is the head of Dial My App in the US. And Dial My App is a call intercept technology that drives digital adoption. Christina is an industry expert, having over 18 years in the telecom space and more in the analytics space. In addition, she has helped large tier ones like AT&T as an example, adopt digital alternative technologies to add business value. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you.
Also with us today is Nikunj Nirmal, and Nikunj is currently a principal at Amazon with responsibilities in technology solutions and strategic development. Nikunj has extensive experience in digital strategy, product management, enterprise architecture, and leveraging technology to advance business strategy. Nikunj has held multiple titles in our space, including CTO, head of digital transformation, and IT delivery across several verticals, including telecom. Welcome, Nikunj.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We see you and we hear you just fine. Thank you. Nikunj was working out some kinks, so glad you made it in.
It goes around at
Um,
the last moment where there is a thunderstorm and the power goes out.
oh, okay, so we'll be prepared. I think we're all familiar with these unexpected realities. Also with us today is Steve Layton. And Steve, although he doesn't describe him this way, once I got to know you a little bit better, I would define him as an entrepreneur and a visionary. Okay. And Steve has over 20 years of experience in telecom and currently serves as the CEO of Vonius. And Vonius provides ultra fast broadband services to poorly connected and hard to reach communities, focusing on the UK. Prior to Vonius, Steve co-founded Keycom, which was a company specializing in the delivery of voice and internet services in the education sector, and also had a successful career in the government space as the head of communication sponsorship at the Department of Trade and Industry. So great panel. I'm excited about the discussion. So what do you say? Let's get into it. I'd like to start with you, Nikunj. And, before we get into the myths and the realities, I think we should level set a little bit on the topic of artificial intelligence. And usually when I read something in artificial intelligence, or when I've leveraged it in some of my past lives, the discussion turns to machine learning and deep learning, right? So could you give us your thoughts on how should we think about machine learning and deep learning?
So let me start with, I think artificial intelligence is an overarching umbrella wherein you can think of AI as machines being trying to mimic human behavior, to be able to think and behave like humans. But then there are more granular aspects to it. This is more of a generic AI. Think of machine learning as a subset of AI, and then deep learning is a subset of machine learning. Machine learning at the core of it is nothing but ability to parse the data, training the computer to be able to parse the data, get inferences out of it, and then look at that information to make some decisions. When we look at deep learning is a more specialized field which has more capabilities, even though it's a subset of machine learning. But the way you can think of deep learning as done through a set of neural networks, what it means is essentially trying to come up with a way the human brain behaves. So you have layers of neurons or neural network layers, and it passes a piece of information one at a time and eventually gets you to the result. The way to differentiate between the two is machine learning is more used for the data parsing, where you have more structured data, like think of simple rows and columns, right? Where you can say, okay, if you want to predict the price, or if you want to understand the pricing for a particular real estate market, then you can look at that information and then come up with the information. But if you want to look at how you want to say recognize cats or dogs images, that's not so much of a structured data. That requires iterative learning. So maybe the first part of the neuron layer would just look at, okay, how much of the information is in there? It's color or black and white. Then you can look at, okay, you're trying to parse just the aspects of the nose from there, right? So look at one after the other and then bring all of the weighted averages together to come up with an identification whether the image is a dog or not. It's kind of more about how you look at the information. A basic difference I would say is go with structured and unstructured. Another difference is the amount of data or amount of computational power that is needed. So you will have a lot more computational power that is required for deep learning because it is unstructured data and it is looking at it, passing it a lot of information. I'll take a pause over there and we can answer any detailed questions.
All right. Yeah. No, I think thank you, Nikunj. I think that's a pretty good visual and helping us understand some key terms. Let's look at the other topic that goes hand in hand, and that is analytics. And specifically, a similar question this time to you, Christina. Help us understand what people mean when they talk about predictive analytics. What does that really mean? How should we think of it?
Well, I think there's a couple of different ways to think of it, but as I think of it, I really think it's about finding that optimal opportunity as a needle in a haystack, right? So you have all these opportunities out there and you're really trying to hone in on and get focus on what's really key to your business right now and how can you make a difference. And through analytics and modeling, you gain the ability to really understand your customers and understand what's relevant for them. So customers obviously is one aspect, but it really applies to really any area of the business. And I think it also applies to different levels of the maturity curve, right? So you have certain scenarios where you have large volumes of data, many inputs, you have millions of customers, maybe large number of SKUs, many parameters that really can drive an outcome. And that's where these tools really become critical to hone in on what's important and what should I focus on. But it also applies to even if you have a shop that's lower on the maturity curve, right? That you're operating more on a hypothesis basis and you're kind of getting into the space of really understanding what drives your business. I've seen cases in my previous experience where you operate more from a hypothesis perspective, and once you start quantifying what each of the drivers does, it really does a dramatic difference to give your operation focus and really hone in on what do we need to do to really make a profound impact in the customer experience.
I love it. I like the hypothesis-based start. I'm going to come back to you. You teased us a little bit with large data. I'm going to come back to that topic a little bit later. I want to go to Steve next, and Steve, referencing another study in 2020 by IDC, they indicated that 64% of operators invested in AI in some form to improve infrastructure. Okay, so we're talking maybe a good way to think about it, the network side of our business, in areas like capacity planning, traffic routing, predicting outages, things of that nature. So as an operator, give us your point of view on this adoption of AI in our industry. Is it real? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to give you some initial thoughts. I mean, from my seat as an operator, there are really two obvious and specific areas where I believe some form of AI could and probably should help us. Okay, the first relates to one of the points you raised in your question, Guy, which is the traffic routing issue. Efficient traffic management systems could be very beneficial if we can get that right. And there's a big question there if we can get that right. I'll give you a living example. If we know over here in the UK that the BBC is streaming a significant live event, and we're armed with knowledge of previous user activity across our network, gleaned through utilization protocols such as NetFlow, etc., it would be great for us to be able to predict automatically which users and which parts of our networks are likely to tune into that event, and we can then adjust automatically our traffic flows and prioritize accordingly to handle the uplift. Of course, an issue with that is it requires some form of commonality between vendor platforms, I suspect, in terms of an AI interface. So put simply, AI and machine learning is less useful in my view if only parts of the network are able to make use of its intelligence. Where I also see real potential, however, is something you haven't mentioned, is in the network design arena, the network design piece. Here at Veneus, we build our own fixed wireless access infrastructure and we build our own fiber to the home infrastructure. On fixed wireless, we do the design internally. We're really good at that. But on fiber, we outsource that design process to a third party, and lead times for design in the UK are becoming ridiculous. It's the main bottleneck in terms of the UK's ambition to roll out a 4 gigabit capable network to every single domicile in the country. If we get the right AI in place in there, the right AI-based design tools, then I think we could smooth out some real timings around that process and make us more efficient.
Great. Yeah, I love the design element as well. I think you're right. And by the way, all the product designers, seems like there's an opportunity in there somewhere too. Hey, Nikunj, we talk a lot about data, right? You can't make this happen without data. And you can't have a discussion on data without the privacy issue, right, surfacing. So again, quoting another recent article, there was an uptick, if you will, an increase in customers opting in with CSPs to actually provide data that was behavior-based. In this case, it had to do with things like switching channels on modems, right, to get very specific as an example. And the CSPs leveraging that data to troubleshoot and even resolve customer issues. So there's an example, but in general, what are your thoughts on customers in our vertical sharing such private data? And do you see some type of trend emerging?
I think when we look at the data sharing and privacy, I would classify it into different parts. The new age services like say Netflix, Amazon Prime, and other streaming services, they don't even ask for this. They're collecting this information, maybe not at an individual customer level, but they have the sense of information, and that's where we get the personalized recommendations coming out of it, right? What you are watching, what are your preferences, etc., etc. When it comes to traditional services, or I would say legacy services, that is where people have more concern because they're not used to having that information. They are used to having that privacy in place. What the CSPs are trying to do is mimic some of that behavior of the new age organizations to be able to be more competitive and do that. So one is about customer concerns. Second is about compliance. We are seeing that with GDPR in place, California has already implemented CPA, and then there are at least 5 different states who are implementing this privacy related laws and regulations. So think about it in ways how the CSPs can assuage the customer concerns. My thought is that one way to do is be upfront and honest about it, what the data is being collected, what information is being shared with whom, and how is that information being used. As long as I think we have that and a simple explanation, not a bunch of legal documentation which goes over 5 pages, but these are the 5 things that we are doing. This is the impact on you. However, there is no personalized information that is being stored. As long as people understand it, I think it's okay. And the last point I would like to make is the freemium model. Right? People seem to be comfortable sharing the information when it comes to likes of Google or Facebook because they are getting something in return for sharing their information. So that is another piece or a model that the CSPs can look at. How about providing some incentives to the customers when you are collecting the information? If the customer sees some benefit, there might be more openness and willingness to understand what's going on and give consent to be able to do that.
Very good. Yeah, no, I think that's great. Past the incentive, I really appreciate your point about being transparent, right? I think the provider customer trust is so important. And I think once you violate that trust, I think it's really difficult to gain it back, but I appreciate that. Christina, I'd like to come back to you. And again, as I stated in the opening comments, you have a lot of experience in the analytics space, including at tier 1 telcos. I wanted to get specific about some functional areas, right? Thinking about an operation and a CSP. Can you share your thoughts and maybe a couple of examples of how telcos use, data-driven insights in their operation?
Yeah, I mean, I would really say, based on my experience at a tier 1 telco, I would really say that most of the areas are evolving to where they are becoming very data driven, right? Very focused on how can we use data to drive value for my particular area. So what I have had visibility to, and actually that we're working with right now at Dial My App, particularly in the call center space, right? There's some great examples there where there's a lot of opportunity and complexity increases, right? So you start kind of at a low level complexity where you have level 1 or tier 1 call reasons, you overlay tier 2, tier 3. Now you're gaining information on notes and comments the customers are making. You also overlay the type of customer profile, so their product mix, their revenue with you, how long they've been in business, their trouble issues, things like that, their previous behavior engaging. And when you start looking at that, now you have thousands of permutations of options of how you actually want to deal with that customer when they're either calling in or coming into digital, right? So that's where it's becoming really powerful to have these tools to basically use machine learning and deep learning as well to really understanding that customer journey process, right? What's the optimal content that's relevant for that customer right now where we can help resolve their example. And so I think that's an area where there's a lot of opportunity because you've got a lot of scale, right? And it's really key because you are directly interacting with that customer. So lots of opportunity in that space to introduce these types of techniques to really, again, focus in on what's relevant for that customer and how do I make them feel like I understand you, I hear you, we're going to give you our best shot. And I think that that's really key.
Yeah, you're spot on. In fact, a lot of people refer to that area as personalization, right?
Yeah.
And you brought up, just to reiterate some of your points, this disparate data. What was your experience with me on the network? What was your experience when you were maybe in a brick and mortar store or in our call center, and being able to correlate what sometimes seems very different data sets and the ability to drive some insights from it, right? Thanks for sharing that. I think you're spot on. And I love the personalization piece because especially in larger companies, it gets very challenging to have more of that personal touch. But with these technologies, I think you can.
Well, and
Steven,
just to add to
go
that,
ahead,
A/B
Christina, quick
testing, right,
follow-up.
is a key enabler. I think we should just, A/B testing is obviously as you start processing that, right? I think that's really where you kind of understand what's resonating with the customer, where do you need to pull back, where do you need to kind of accelerate. So absolutely.
Yeah. And then not to, Christina and others much smarter than me on A/B testing, but in case some folks have not experienced A/B testing, just like it infers, it basically, borrowing one of your earlier thoughts, if you have, say, two hypotheses, right, and you want to test which one bears the greatest fruit, you actually are able through, and there's great technology out there to help you with automating A/B testing, where you see the result set of two different hypotheses real time, and you tweak your marketing campaign or what have you accordingly. Spot on. Looks like we may have lost Nikunj. Hopefully he'll come back. The next question actually is going to Steve. Again, another pivot. This time, Steve, I want to talk about, natural language and virtual assistants, because this is another area where we've seen the adoption or really the advancement of artificial intelligence, right? Using computers to make decisions where they understand the full context of, we'll say, the conversation. And I think some easy examples these days that people could think of is either Siri on their iPhone or maybe Alexa, right? So instead of individual words, computers taking the context of a sentence and being able to assist with areas such as problems. In fact, Juniper Research stated that telecoms, again, just some predictions, will cut expenses by $8 billion by 2022 through the adoption of these virtual assistants. Remains to be seen, but an interesting number, never the fact. So, Steve, coming to you and focusing on self-service with the use of these technologies, share some of your thoughts on how you see them evolving and being adopted by CSPs.
Yeah, thanks, Guy. I mean, it's a tricky one from our perspective, and I can only really speak from the perspective of Aeneas. And I'm going to be a little bit negative on this one, I'm afraid, because we're a community broadband provider, so we spend a long time in the whole pre-sale process that's community based. So we cultivate relationships with our communities before we build a single piece of infrastructure. And because what we're building is brand new sites, taking connectivity where there is none, we're constantly installing new customers on new infrastructure. And at this stage in our life cycle, there's no scope really for a self-install, plug and play replacement type solution. So no scope for a virtual assistant solution. All of our installations are virgin installations that effectively require an engineer to attend and fix something either to the outside or the inside of the property or both. In terms of management of that customer and the solution and the product once installed, I agree there is scope for these new technologies to play a role. but our customers actually like the fact that we talk to them and that we're available 24/7. So that's one of the hurdles I think we need to overcome as a business.
Those are some great thoughts. I don't think that's negative at all. It's part of why we're having this discussion. It's the realities. And,
Yeah.
you know,
And I think
the
the pandemic,
relationships.
sorry.
Oh, no, please, Steve. Real quick, I was going to say, really, you focused on that relationships with your customer. And let's face it, it's hard to automate often, even with personalization. So please go ahead with some of your other thoughts you're about to add on.
I'm simply going to say that people like people, right? And during the pandemic, we were all cut off from each other for a very long time. And I think companies like ours that communicate regularly with the customer and gave them a lifeline, a connectivity lifeline during the pandemic, you know, we genuinely believe that what we're delivering to these guys was the fourth utility. It's up there with gas, electricity, and water. It's a lifeline, and that lifeline issue was exacerbated by the pandemic. And our customers, as I mentioned, we like to focus, and Christina, I'm sure, will agree with me. We like to focus on that whole customer journey being a smooth transitional journey, from pre-sale through to sale, through to install, through to switching them on and then collecting their money. We like them to have, you know, regular single points of contact within the business so that we get to know them and they get to know us.
Cool. Yeah, great thoughts. Again, another pivot. Nikunj, thanks for coming back, man. I think we need some broadband for you. I need it for me too, by the way. You know,
A little bit out of our reach, Nikunj.
Just keep interrupting, but that's fine. I think I am back on time.
No. You got the power issue going on by you. But seriously, I want to talk about robotic process automation. Most people refer to it as just simply RPA. And honestly, I remember some years back, and you know, when I was leading an IT division at AT&T, and I heard about RPA, I kept thinking, this is just a fancy phrase for business process automation, because everyone talked about taking, you know, manual tasks. I remember talking about order fallout and how you automate, you know, getting them repaired and fixing. But then as I read more, I really learned that true RPA technology leverages artificial intelligence technology, right? And so for you, and you know, in your past practices, have you seen where RPA leveraged AI effectively? And you know, there's a two-part question. So have you seen the use of RPA with AI being used effectively? And then the second question related is there a sweet spot, you know, from your experience in our industry where RPA can be used for some immediate payback?
Absolutely. So you're perfectly right. I think when people talk about RPA, it is nothing but automation of the manual task, right? You could be using some of the tools like UiPath, Automation Anywhere, and a lot of other tools available out there, Blue Prism. But at the same time, I think we have been doing RPA for a long time, writing through simple shell or Perl scripts, automating some of the tasks. Right? So that's very much there. But I think when you combine with the ability to make decisions based on the data, that's where the AI comes in. So the core differentiation is not just knowing what to do and executing that, but also looking at the information dynamically and to be able to make those decisions based on the information and then taking a call on it. I think that's where the AI piece is truly powerful, because then you are not limited by the subset of the information that you have or the set of predefined tasks. One of the great examples is, of course, I think, and it's catching up quite well, is Net AI Ops. A lot of people would have heard of that, right? Essentially looking at the network quality, network, continuously monitoring the network parameters, and then looking at, okay, if this particular subdivision is running into a problem, to be able to predict that problem first. These are the 5 parameters. I know that from my past experiences that when these things happen, it's probably going to lead to an outage. So looking at it from a predictive standpoint, and then typically looking at, okay, what would you do to prevent an outage? And that's where the action part of it, or the robotic process automation part of it, comes in. So looking at combining both of this can really improve the customer experience. Second area is, of course, when it comes to digital applications, it's looking at anomaly. traditionally, if you look at the applications, we are just looking at, hey, if the CPU drops below 80% or increases beyond 80% usage, there is a risk. But then these are all static rules. How about we look at the anomaly in terms of the customer experience itself? We're not going to just look at the parameters of the applications or the servers. We're going to look at the business transactions and if there are any anomalies in the business transactions, and then to be able to take an action based on that. That's where again the intelligence would come in, and then using that intelligence to make the decisions. And the third area and the last one I would say is personalization. Personalization could be in your digital interfaces. It could be in the customer experience centers as well, where you are able to predictively look at if a customer is calling in at this particular time, these are the past set of calls, looking at all that information and then automatically coming up with a set of predefined actions, even if they are talking to a human, but enabling that human with the right set of actions so that he or she does not have to go back and figure out and troubleshoot from the very beginning every time. I think that's where the intelligence would come in and would really transform the experiences and the touch points that enterprises have with their customers. And I think making a call as a customer, I would say making a call to a telco to troubleshoot is a painful experience. If we can reduce or eliminate that in any way, I think that's a big win for any telco.
Yeah, you're spot on. In fact, connecting on a theme that, you, Steve, and Christina touched on with the customer journey and, really satisfying the customer where they don't have to call in. And when I think about some of the areas that I spent a lot of time in terms of things not going so well, I looked at the full provisioning cycle. And some of you know, in tier 2s and tier 1s, and I suspect even in some tier 3s, measuring flow through provisioning was key. It was a KPI. Why? Because there was a lot of cost, right, with orders that didn't automatically provision all the way through and activate. So another use case for RPA was really, and use of AI, is to be able to assess where those orders are getting stuck or fall out, right? And being able to repair and flow through without having to get the customer back on the call. Hey, earlier on, data. I keep hearing data when we talk about artificial intelligence and what have you. So I'd like to go back to data. And Christina, I said earlier, you mentioned, the big data sets. So when you think of big data, again, we have a topic that's been around for some time and most people are familiar with the intent, right? Where, just like you alluded earlier, you take these disparate data sets and you're able to correlate and drive some decisions, right? Look at some trends, maybe even identify opportunities from it. So, thinking of big data and analytics, the question, just getting right to it, do you think CSP should continue to not only invest, but specifically, what would you say to those CSP leaders that are not yet sold on the return on the investment?
Sorry, can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
I think I would really say if you want to stay in the game, you have to invest. I think it's such a critical element to really differentiating yourself and providing a competitive advantage. I think as things are, customer expectations are accelerating, pace is going faster. I think you have to have an underlying platform to deal with that and deal with the complexities that come with that in an effective way. And I think that where we are today, right? I mean, there are so many solutions out there that from a cloud-based perspective where you can quickly scale up or down based on what your needs are. And so I think with those capabilities being in place, everyone, again, coming back to what I said earlier, I think everyone can look in their area and see where am I on the maturity curve? What are my opportunities? And find a solution that's relatively cost effective that can give you some quick low hanging fruit. And then of course there's a long-term horizon, which always one of you on the look for. But I think that there are plenty of opportunities out there from a infrastructure perspective that can help solve your needs quickly. So I would say definitely don't shy away from that, invest in it. It's an area where you can, with relatively few dollars, sometimes have a profound impact.
It's interesting. Now, Steve, Christina says, you got to get off the dime. right? As we say in the US, maybe in the UK too. She said you have to invest. But I will tell you, maybe another related point, some business leaders are concerned that they have to hire, like data scientists and, maybe machine learning experts. Frankly, a skill set that, quite frankly, it can be fairly expensive. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I'm no expert on that piece, but I suspect that some form of development talent will be needed to make the investment in these alternative approaches useful. I'm not convinced you need to employ an army of data scientists to make a successful investment in the space. But and of course, you'll all be aware, everyone on this call, there are a number of tools out there already, some of which are quite reasonably priced, that can help businesses move towards a more predictive AI analytics-based future. But one thing I struggle with at the moment as an operator is how much real AI do some of these existing tools actually have, and how much of it is simply repackaged old algorithmic tech. So that's the personal kind of battle I have with myself on a daily basis when we're looking at investment cases.
Yeah, good points. Some healthy skepticism, I think, is always good, right? Do your homework.
Yeah, I'm prepared to be converted. I just need somebody to take me to Mecca.
I feel like I want to convert you, but I'll take that offline after this.
There you go. Let me host a call between you guys.
I think there's
Hey,
solutions
listen,
for you.
some great insights, some great thoughts. We're going to pick up the pace. We're going to move to this lightning round that I've been doing on some of these calls. And here again, I'm going to come to each of you with the same question. We're looking for short, quick answers. Don't need to explain why. We'll take your word for it. Okay. So let's get started. We're going to go in this order. I'll remind you along the way: Christina, Nikunj, and then Steve. Ready? Elton. Okay. Now you have to pick one thing for this question. If you have to pick one thing to maximize success of an AI or analytics project or effort, what would you tell our audience? Christina.
Pick the right people. I think that's critical.
Right people. Nikunj.
Focus on personalization and customer experience.
Where to focus. Steve.
Make it feel human.
Consistency. Back to the relationship and human. Okay, next question, same order. So now you have budget. You've convinced your leaders, Christina, you've convinced them. We're going to do something in AI, analytics. We're going to dip our toe. But you only have enough to focus in one area of your CSP. Given your experience and your personal beliefs, what is the one area where you would start your investment?
I think I would look in the contact center space, large volumes, lots of scale, and the ability to have a big impact.
Okay, contact. Nikunj?
I'll second that, including highlighting the technical support part of it.
Okay, Stephen?
No doubt network operations, so that we could just reduce customer call volumes by monitoring and auto fixing network issues.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised by your answers, by the way. And we didn't do this before, so you guys haven't heard each other's answers, because some of it will depend, right, on your business, and I believe also in the tiers of the telecoms. So next question, okay, this has to do with these investments we've been talking about, and specifically, I'm looking for your opinion on if, say, next year, 2022, do you think CSPs in general will increase, decrease, or keep investments about the same? Christina?
Increase, for sure.
I would say increase.
Steve?
Yeah, probably a slight increase, moving more towards automation. Yeah.
Perfect. Got it.
Towards automation. Yeah.
Now we've talked a little bit about tiers. I know earlier Christina gave an example. She was talking about tiers of opportunities, troubles, right? But here we're talking about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3s in telecom operators. So if I'm a smaller CSP, a smaller operator, think tier 3 or maybe even a tier 2, is adopting artificial intelligence and analytics out of reach, too expensive, or is it still an opportunity for me? Christina?
No, I think the opportunities are out there. I think there are solutions, and just pick wisely with your partner, who you're partnering
Okay.
with.
Nikunj?
I think the traditionally expensive piece of hardware is now easily available on a scalable aspect with GCP, AWS, and Azure. So I think it's accessible to everybody.
Cloud. Okay, and Steve?
Yeah, I agree. It's within reach, but the issue is it's not seen by many tier 2s and 3s as an investment priority just yet.
Good add. Let's bring in an emotional aspect for the last lightning round question. We're talking about jobs, right? And when you talk about artificial intelligence, sometimes you hear people are concerned that it will eliminate jobs and displace humans, specifically in contact center, a space where a couple of you said you would start. So just thinking, I don't know, saying 5-ish years or so, do you think we will displace the need for humans in positions, say like in contact centers? Christina?
I think we will see a shift. I think we're going to see a shift in the types of skill set that's required. So in that space, we might see an immediate reductions, but see upscaling in other areas.
Absolutely. I think there will be a partial shift. It will take a long time to get there though, but there will be a partial shift in the type of skill set required going forward.
Stephen?
Yeah, I think long term we'll see that shift, but short term there's too much problem variety and people still want to talk to people.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we could do a whole learning session just on this one topic. I think it brings an emotional element to it. So maybe we will do one in the future. Okay. So let me remind the audience that if you have a question, please go ahead and place it in the chat. I'm going to ask the panelists one final question, okay? And then I'm going to take some of the questions from the audience. And we're right on time. Oh, I'm getting some network connection feedback. So I'm hoping you guys can hear me. Give me a nod if you can hear me. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. All right. So I've asked our panelists, when I've talked to them before joining us, to be totally transparent on this last question. And I've asked them to, without sharing any secret sauce or proprietary information, but reflecting on their businesses and their experiences, right? There is this great deal of skepticism, I think, still, mostly because of the return on investment by some hasn't been there, okay? So given your experience, share your final thoughts on if and why a CSP needs to embrace AI and analytics, at least as part of their strategy to some extent. We'll go in the same order. Christina, your final thoughts.
Sure. Well, I think coming back to what I said earlier, I think as customer expectations grows and you have to move at a faster speed, you introduce more complexity in your business. I think you have to invest in these areas here. I think if you're wise about how you lay out that strategy and your growth path for that, then I think it can truly become a competitive advantage that really can differentiate you against your competitors. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in this space here.
Okay, competitive advantage. Nikunj, what about you?
For me, I think everything revolves around the customer experience and the brand experience. So I would say the set of investments into different areas, be it network, be it customer service, be it fraud prevention, all of that has to lead very focused in terms of enhancing your brand experience for the customers. As long as I think we are doing that, there would definitely be an ROI. And I strongly believe that the efforts and investment should continue in AI analytics to that effect.
Okay, Stephen, some final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's clear to me there are some real advantages to be gained by going down this road, but the real issue for companies like mine is around the investment required to get there. So we're backed by a significant global investment bank, so cash is not a constraint, but I still need to convince them that spend in this area is a priority for this business in the shorter term. In simple terms, I can spend $5 million to use your money on infrastructure and know that I'll get a fixed number of customers and therefore revenue from that investment. if I spend the same amount on AI and or analytics, how do I demonstrate to those guys clearly the return on that investment? Will it add enough value in terms of the overall customer journey and the overall customer experience to allow us to continue to promote our love our customer mantra, which is what we often talk about with Inverness? If we move towards that more automated solution, do we lose that love our customer mantra where we speak with them less? I'd need to be convinced on that, and if I can be, then show me where to sign.
Yeah. Now you bring it, not to put words in your mouth, but as I listen to you, I keep thinking about understanding, your competitive advantage in some cases, right? And make sure that, you don't make a tactical move that, quite frankly, doesn't align with your strategy, your vision, and maybe even a competitive advantage that you may have. Just my interpretation, or extension of some of your thoughts. Okay, thank you for that. Let's take a couple of questions from the audience. Again, post them in the chat. Let's take one related to something we've already talked about with hiring talent. Nikunj, I'll throw this one to you. So what kind of skills does one need to get started if you're going down the path of AI and analytics in your business?
I think I always believe that it starts with understanding the business. So even though the execution will be done by the technical folks, it's very critical to have the right set of people who understand the impact of the business and understand the customers and their point of view. So when we are talking about an end-to-end journey of a customer, look at it from that perspective. So the people who are able to do that. When it comes to the technical skill set, I think it's pretty straightforward across the industry. Have the folks, data scientists are the key, with the right math background to be able to come up with the right algorithms, and then having the right set of tools. So having solution architects who are able to view at different tools and see what best fits the need. And that's where, again, it goes back to understanding the business. Because I've seen many a times where the incorrect tool set is taken up to start with, and then it doesn't really scale, or it doesn't address the future business cases. So having that visibility and the right level of solution architects is the key. Followed by that, of course, you got your standard developers, which everybody knows. So I wouldn't go into all of those.
Yeah. No, those are definitely, I could see as some of the skills that one would need. But I also agree with one of the other points that several of you made. It's not out of reach, right? It's not out of reach. You don't need to make everybody a data scientist. Quite frankly, I've seen personally some attempts to build a large pool of data scientists, and quite frankly, the return wasn't there.
Go for it. I think you were.
Finish your thought, then we'll come back to you, Christina.
Sure. I was just saying that there are a lot of ready models available today for different business use cases. So to your point, Guy, you're right. If we have the right set of people who understand the business and who understand the tools, I think they can combine the two and use the ready-made models to get started and have you don't need to start from the scratch today. That's, I think, the key, and that's where the reachability goes everywhere.
Yeah, and risk comes down. Christina.
I was just going to add to Nico what you were saying about really honing in on the use case, right? That you really want to solve for, so you understand what do I need. And then I think the other element is we all want to focus on the sexy stuff, right? The data science aspect of it. But I think it's quick to underestimate your data platform, right? You have to have a good infrastructure in order to really, put the data scientists to work and bring that ROI. So that's why I think if you understand your use case, then you really can hone in on what are the components I'm missing, and make sure that you have that solid data infrastructure in place to put the data scientists to work.
Yeah, good add-on.
Yeah.
Hey, I got another one. I'm going to throw it to you, Steve. And we've kind of said it, right? You don't have to start from scratch. I think Nikunj said, right, and as someone earlier said, there are tools readily available. Let's talk about those tools, and I think this question has to do with that. If I'm going to purchase some software or tool, in today's world, right, a lot of software companies are moving to as a service model, kind of rent it, pay as you go, and others are still selling full licenses. Some are given an option. So as an operator, I mean, what are your thoughts? Should I pursue an as a service or license, or maybe a quick pros and cons of each?
Well, I think the first question and the first issue is your honest statement of requirements. Okay, you need to understand exactly what it is you need, and we've done this dance recently. You know, we've been looking for a single solution that unifies all the different elements of our customer journey, from that pre-sale through to sale, through to install, etc., right the way through to collecting their cash when they become a subscriber. And we've spent a lot of money on that journey and failed to find a single solution. And we've ended up buying 3 or 4 different software packages and creating our own bits of middleware to knit all that together to give us a solution that we want. Now, a lot of the tier 1 guys I know have suffered similar pain. So I think my advice is be very, very clear from day one what your statement of requirements is. Be clear what you need and what you want, because otherwise you'll do what we did and tap dance around the houses for a long time before finally realizing that what you want isn't a single solution.
Yeah, I love what you said. I mean, I always tell people there's a lot of things in technology that have changed, and there's some things that haven't. And for someone who's been around for a while and seen some software go well and a lot fail,
You need
not
a flexible
understanding.
partner, Guy. Sorry, you need a flexible partner. So too many software companies say, this is what we make, how many do you want? Okay, whereas what they should be saying is, what can we do for you? What's your statement of requirements? What do you need? And we'll help
and you
you
need to be clear on that. To your earlier point, you need to be clear on the requirements. And I would add alignment within the firm, large or small, on those requirements always helps too. Hey, we have another question that's come in that's somewhat related. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. It alludes to, again, the AI investments. And Steve, you made a comment that, you know, larger telecoms may have financial backing, many do not. So if you don't have a large budget, this is the question. If you don't have a large budget, some thoughts on where do you start? Some ideas. Where does one start if you don't have a large budget? Anybody want to share a thought? Steve, maybe, you know, you talked about this a little bit, and as an operator, any creative ideas?
Well, I think I'll just repeat what I said for the last question. If you haven't got a large budget, then you need to be even clearer about precisely what it is you want and what value you're looking to add. Okay, we have a 100% focus on our customer. Although we are backed by an infrastructure fund, we don't call ourselves an infrastructure company. We call ourselves a customer acquisition and retention company, because we like to grab customers and keep them. So if you've got a limited budget and you're looking to move into this field, make sure that what you spend that money on benefits your customer, not just your internal operations.
Yeah, and I have a thought on that too. Anybody else want to add something before I throw my thoughts and wrap?
Sure. This is not that groundbreaking, but just want to share an experience where we did something very similar in my old organization, where we basically gathered all these different use cases, you know, did a little bit of analytics on them to say, okay, these different hypotheses, which one can we quickly go after that are low-hanging fruit, and do we think high, medium, and low, where do they fall? And it's a simple exercise that everyone can do, probably just cost you a couple of hours. And it gives you a really good sense of where should I focus? Where are my big rocks? And it helped clear that noise in terms of what are the focus areas. So, and it's a simple but effective tool.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you, Christina, on that. One of the examples I have, and going back to what Steve was saying, focusing on the right things. So we did a similar exercise in my previous org, where we looked at just a customer's contact service, and then what are those areas where we are seeing the most trouble coming in, and one of them was technical support, wherein a lot of AI can be leveraged. And that's where we focused on coming up with tools and solutions, just focused on that piece, and that would give us the highest ROI. Again, the same thing can be replicated on the digital side, it can be replicated on the network side, but just honing in on that, and it doesn't take a lot of time.
So
and
just
that's
I'll add another,
joining those bits together.
I'll add one. By the way, I agree with what was said, right? Focus, know your requirements, prioritize, best payback. But I'll add one that sometimes folks don't think of. And by the way, I purchased a lot of software and some hardware in my career, probably billions, right? Not probably, in the billions. And I will tell you something that I think is an option that large and small carriers don't do enough of, and that is ask your partners to invest. Okay? Okay? A nice proof of value. I don't have the funds, but I'm willing to do something different. How about a revenue share model, right? So don't always think money's got to come up. There's other ways to invest, right? And ask your partners to invest, but be willing to also share the fruits of that investment, meaning the return. Okay, so that's just another idea. I'd like to wrap up because we're out of time. I want to thank my panelists for their thoughts first. So Christina, Stephen, Nikunj, I enjoyed it. Thank you guys first and foremost. I appreciate it. Also want to thank ETI and the sponsors of the Broadband Bunch for putting on these learning series. They're fun to do, and they're also a lot of fun to watch. Thanks to our audience for watching this. And I want to remind everybody that there is a website for the Broadband Bunch, www.broadbandbunch.com, where you can watch past recorded sessions and also get some other insights. And we hope in closing that this has been helpful and provided some thought-provoking conversation for you. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you at the next session. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you all.